Real-life creep stories that no one believes in. A week ago, at exactly 3:34 a.m., my younger sister came to me. She tearfully asked for ice cream. I can't refuse her, so I dutifully go to the kitchen and put the treat on the dining table. The next night at 3:34, Lily came to me again. But this time, the girl reported that she was cold and scared in a dark room. And again I obediently followed her into the bedroom. At first I decided to close the window, but when I approached it, it was as if an invisible hand was pushing me down. It was very hard to stay in my place. "I'm really scared, Billy." I began to calm my sister, although I was trembling with fear at that moment. In the morning, Mom asked who I was talking to that night. He told me that Lilia couldn't sleep, and I calmed her down for a long time. Mom was very upset and replied that it was time for me to go to a therapist again. And here it is again, 3:34 in the morning. Lily comes to my room again and says that she is bored and that I should read a fairy tale. I can't refuse her. Again, I obey the order of my sister and go for a book. You can rightly point out to me that this is not a scary story at all. But my sister has been dead for 3 years now. About once a year, for a month, she comes to me at 3:34 and asks me to do something. If I refuse, then someone in my family dies. My parents don't believe me and believe that I'm just going through the loss of a loved one hard. But it's not like that. Yesterday, Lily came to my room again and asked for a warm blanket. When I was covering her, her sister's eyes turned black in an instant, and she said, "I want you to be with me. I'm very bored and scared there. Sooner or later, it will be." One day I was at home, and I got a call. A young woman's voice is on the other end. She very excitedly said, "Hi. Someone called me from this number and said that my missing cat was here." Well, I told her that she must have the wrong number, because I definitely didn't call anyone, and I don't have anyone's cat. That's the whole conversation. The girl hung up. After about 10 minutes, I went to get my mail, live on the first floor, leaving the door of his apartment open. As soon as I push the door into the vestibule, where the handwriting is located, a black and white fluffy lump sneaks into my apartment. I return to my living room and see this cute creature sitting on the arm of my sofa, looking at me. A little surprised. Meaning, I just told someone that I don't have random cats in my apartment, and suddenly one is located on my couch. In any case, it is necessary to make a decision. I noticed that the cat has a tag on the collar. I read the text. "Hi, my name is Skittles. If I get lost, call my hostess at such a number." I dial this number and wait for an answer. This is a young woman who just talked to me for only 10 minutes ago. I stammered a little and said, "This is going to sound weird, but now I have your cat." Of course, the owner of the per quickly got to the right address, went into the apartment, and looked at me very suspiciously. Then she thanked me and left. I have no explanation for this case. 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting on the internet, and my younger sister is sleeping on the bed behind me. At that time he was quite an adult guy. I was about 11 years old at the time, and didn't believe in mysticism. Therefore, when he heard a strange rattle, thought, "Wherein, my sister, a cold will need to tell your mom about this." The sound was getting louder. It felt like someone was wheezing right in my ear. At first I thought that my sister was having a very bad breath, and then I was afraid that she was suffocating in her sleep. I turn around abruptly and see that she is not asleep and is looking at me intently. The next moment the girl whispered, "Isn't that you?" And, as if answering her question, a terrible and frightening rattle was heard from the space right between us, this time much louder. Like frightened rabbits caught off guard, we both jumped to our feet and then froze, listening. The sound broke the silence again. The growling grew more and more. Logically assumed that some kind of animal got into the room. Together we began to inspect the bedroom, but there was no one. I thought it had crawled under the bed. The bed was rummaged, the bed was moved to crucify, but nothing was found. At some point my legs started to freeze. The floor was like the bottom of a freezer, and this is the height of summer for a minute. My sister felt it too. We climbed on the bed. I instinctively looked at the door, afraid that someone will come out. A minute later, I hear Aaron's hysterical cry, "Look out the window." There was a face behind the glass, just a face without a body. It was pale and gray, and its eyes shone like a wolf's. After that, we both began to hear creepy and frightening laughter. Out of fear, they ran out of the room and began to call their parents. When we returned to the room, everything was as usual. The floor is the same temperature as in the rest of the house. All things are in their places, and the bed is perfectly made. I have no idea what it was, but fortunately, this person did not visit us again. I was homeless, living on the streets of San Francisco. I spent the night anywhere for about 2 years. I ate out of dumpsters, a lot of low-quality booze, and much more at some point almost ruined me. Once again, I was brought to the hospital near death. The doctors saved my life, and a week later, I went on foot to wander around San Francisco again. That same night, I remember, I found some abandoned kiosk on the outskirts of the city, and went there to spend the night. Somewhere at 3 in the morning, a sudden knock woke me up. As I was not fully awake yet, I opened the door of the kiosk, and saw a strange man on the threshold. He was obviously dressed out of fashion. The stranger entered the kiosk, and looked at my temporary shelter with disgust. Without preliminaries and introductions, the man began his strange monologue. "Look at yourself. What have you turned into?" I already wanted to object and send a bore, because no one has the right to talk about me like that, but he rudely interrupted me. "Be silent, remember this day. Exactly 1 year later, on July 25th, 2017, at 3:34 a.m., I will come again. If you don't improve, I'll take you with me." The stranger threw an old coin and disappeared. I'm not kidding, he literally disappeared. Of course, you can say that these are hallucinations, but no, I was completely sober and remembered. Your mind? It was very difficult for me to improve. There were breakdowns, hospitals, injuries, but the coin in my pocket brought me back to the goal of returning to a normal life. A year after the strange event, I could honestly say that I was healthy. I was working as a waitress then and rented a room. Of course, I was waiting for this stranger on July 25th, 2017, but he never showed up. But the coin suddenly disappeared from my pocket. I started my vacation and had a lot of free time, so I decided to plunge into the history of the house in which our family now lives. It was built around 1760. The first inhabitants were the Ethan family, and the house belonged to this dynasty for the next 100 years, before becoming a flop house in 1865. Between 1820 and 1830, John Ethan, his wife Sally, and 7 of their 9 children died. The owner retired first, in 1821, probably from an ulcer. The next eldest son did not die in the house. Shortly after his father's death, he disappeared into the sea without a trace. Sally and the 7 children stayed in this small house in very difficult circumstances. Then, in quick and heartbreaking succession, the rest of the family began to die, one by one. Sally and 6 small children died from a terrible disease, which we now know as tuberculosis. From a large and strong family, only 10 years ago there was one person left. Charles, the second eldest son, the only survivor, packed up and went west to Kansas. But not misfortune, neither luck nor longevity, there it was waiting. And the poor guy died in 1856, still being a young man. 2 days ago, around 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 separately hanging paintings fell at the same time. And last night I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, and I heard him put it on the table. They put down a cup or something like that. In the silence of the night, it sounded as if someone had turned the cup over and knocked it loudly on the surface. But what happened last night made me seriously think about moving. I remember standing in the hallway at that moment, near the door to the toilet. There was a staircase on the opposite side of the bathroom, and thought about something. It was just a moment of immersion in my thoughts. Therefore, I did not immediately notice someone's whisper, "Johnny?" First, for some reason, I thought that my wife is speaking to me, but at the same moment, I remembered that my name is Thomas. "Johnny, where's my son?" "What? Johnny who? What son?" "I have 2 daughters," I thought, and at the same moment I remembered the past residents of this house. But before I could react, somehow, someone invisible pushes me down the stairs. Fortunately, I didn't get any serious injuries, only bruises. But now the thought does not leave me that I urgently need to get out of here before my relatives suffer. When I was 10 years old, we lived in an old house. I well remember one terrible moment. At night I suddenly woke up and did not immediately understand what was the reason for waking up. The only light in my room was from a street lamp coming through the window, so I could see something from a short distance, but everything was there. It was pretty dark. My computer and chair were at the other end of the wall. There was a window between us, so it was even darker in that corner than anywhere else in my room. Before that, I was sleeping with my face to the wall, so at some point, I decided to roll over to see if I could fall asleep again in a different position. As soon as I lay down on another god, my eyes immediately picked out my chair from the darkness. I saw a figure sitting on it. She didn't look like a human, more like a monster or a demon. What I saw struck me so much that I completely held my breath, motionless in bed, looking straight at this dark entity with all my eyes. Near my bed, not daring to move, I could only see the dark outline of the ghost, but still made out that he was an adult size, much larger than me. The only thing I could clearly see in the person sitting on the chair was his eyes. They glowed in the dark and looked dark red like rubies on a black background. My eyes began to water, burning my face with hot drops, so I began to pray, whispering the words of prayer, barely moving my numb lips for about half an hour. I just lay there and stared in front of me, trying not to let the thought of a bad outcome of such a meeting. After I finished praying, I turned to the ghost through my tears. "Please leave me alone. I don't want to die. Let me sleep." Then I covered my head with a pillow and thought that if I stayed in hiding, everything would be fine. He'll leave me alone. I fell asleep, and when I woke up in the morning, there was no one near the bed. Only my chair was standing next to me, the seat turned to me. But I remember exactly how it pushed him behind the table. I lived with a roommate in an old house built in the early 1970s. The main building was an attached garage that is slightly moved forward towards the street. Residents, being in this place, could hear people driving up to the house and going to the front door. So, one night I'm sitting in the garage and smoking. Suddenly I hear a strong knock on the iron door. Then everything subsides. I think maybe it's the wind rattling the gate, but the knocking starts again, and the voice of a teenage girl can be heard very clearly, shouting, "Let me in, help!" I jump up and quickly walk to the front door. I open it, there's no one in sight. It's windless. It's been snowing all day, so there should be footprints if it was someone's stupid joke, but no footprints or tire prints. Nothing. When I was very young, I was nursed by my maternal grandmother. She lived in her tiny city apartment in a big American city. Old Nana was a Lithuanian gypsy by origin. I have so many strange memories of my time with her. Here is an example. At the age of 6, I liked to watch my grandmother in the kitchen, put a chair next to the table at the stove, and helped Nana cook all kinds of delicious food from scratch. As a child, I was taught never to touch the stove, especially dangerous when the burners are red. We are talking about an electric stove. However, I was a witness as my grandmother put the whole hand on the bright red burner, and with her hand, nothing happened. Nana was distracted by her cat at that moment, and, chasing him away, absent-mindedly leaned on the stove, right on the circle. I was amazed. I distinctly remember how my 6-year thought process developed something like this. Maybe I'm being deceived, and the stove is not hot. I have to check it out. But as soon as I was about to touch the burner, Grandma instantly pushed my hand away, hitting it painfully. She looked me in the eye and said sternly, "No, you can't do that." I remember her angry expression as clearly as if it had happened 5 minutes ago. In the house where I lived as a child, strange things happened. One day a marker flew into the bathroom when I was in the toilet and almost hit me in the face. There was no one upstairs at the time. I'm the only one on the whole second floor. The door to my room remained open, so I could clearly see that at the moment when the marker flew in, there was no one in the corridor. There were days when my bedroom door was constantly opening and closing. It closed by itself. One day, when we were playing with my brother, the TV in his room suddenly turned on. Because of the loud sound coming from the snow screen, nothing could be heard. We couldn't turn it off by pressing the power button. I disconnected the TV from the network, but it remained on. My brother and I looked at each other in confusion and quickly left the room. My sister, cousin, and I were playing in our room one day when the door closed by itself. I went over and tried to push her, but she wouldn't give in to my efforts and wouldn't open. We started screaming when we couldn't go outside, alerting our parents with our screams. My mom and aunt tried to open the door for 20 minutes before it swung open on its own. My sister is older than me, and she has an even more bizarre story about our house. Now I live separately, far enough away from my parents, but mysterious phenomena still happen in my current house. One night, the shower turned on its own. The water was so hot that my bath turned into a sauna. I live alone, but personal items often disappear, only to reappear in random places weeks or months later. I've always been interested in the possibility of extraterrestrials, but I've never really thought about it. The idea of using a light beam to contact extraterrestrial civilizations originated in my head, precisely under the influence of a note I read on Reddit. During a working trip to Singapore in 2011, I bought a powerful laser with a US connection for a very small amount. Just imagine, a 200 unit with a range of 70 miles. When I returned home to the UK, I played around with this device for a while and programmed a sequence of prime numbers in a cycle firm to 297 in the blinking laser. considering that it was winter and the weather was quite cloudy. I put the device in a drawer and forgot about it until summer came. On the eve of the most intense night of the meteor shower in 2012, Persid took out his laser and decided to start testing. I've always loved going out on a night like this. Every year I did a time-lapse shooting of the starry sky. Usually, such images are taken with a 24mm wide-angle lens, which clearly shows the Milky Way moving across the sky. But tonight it was different. I wanted to experiment, so I switched to a longer lens, my trusty Canon 85 f12L. This is not good for a time-lapse. I didn't have any expectations, just curious to see what results it would bring. Glued the laser to the camera so that its beam was visible in the field of view of the lens. Then he fixed the camera on a tripod and made sure that the legs of the stand were securely installed in the field, after which he pointed the camera straight up. I thought it was best to take photos, not videos, to get high-quality pictures. I always take a few test shots to make sure my focus, aperture and shutter speed settings are okay. Everything was fine. When viewing images on the camera screen, the stars are clearly visible, the picture is extremely clear. Nothing significant happened for the first 20 minutes. The Milky Way and a few meteors flying across the sky. I liked such beautiful nights. I took a thermos full of hot chocolate with me, and now I enjoyed drinking my favorite drink with the stars. And then I suddenly noticed that a glowing dot appeared a little to the side of the laser, and it rotates very slowly around the beam. Over the next few minutes, new lights began to appear, maybe one per minute. They moved across the sky and joined the first one, rotating around the laser beam. I counted about 30 light points. These were not planes or helicopters. No, I couldn't hear anything else except the muffled city noise coming from the outskirts of my town about a couple of miles away. It was impossible to estimate how high the lights were circling. They seemed quite far away, but I'm sure it's not fireflies or other glowing insects. All the lights rotated around the beam in clockwise circles for about 10 minutes. At first, this circling was independent of each other, and then some glowing dots began to change their speed, rearranging the movement. I could see the lights synchronizing their turns and slowly forming a pattern. It was a spiral, and it was spinning around my laser beam. The curls of the spiral were quite densely arranged relative to each other, skirting an endless stream of bright laser light, and my camera could capture it all. I do not know how long I watched the wonderful show. Enough images have already been taken to determine the exact time. This spectacle with UFOs synchronized in a spiral lasted only about 3 minutes. But I'm willing to swear that I looked at everything for at least 30 minutes. I just got lost in time-space at these moments. And then, the relative silence in this field was interrupted by jet engines overhead. The lights in the sky began to quickly fade out and disappear from the outside of the spiral, all the way to the inside. And everything just instantly dissolved into darkness. I immediately thought that if they were out of sight, I should also leave immediately. I quickly packed up my gear and went home. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and there was too much adrenaline in my blood to go to bed. I decided to look at the pictures and downloaded the images taken by the camera. For the first 20 minutes, they had a nice night sky and lots of stars. But at the moment you should see a UFO, the frame was pure white. Each image has hundreds of pictures. I wondered for a second if the sensor had burned out, took a few pictures, and everything was in perfect order. I changed the settings on all the white photos, trying to restore some details, but nothing came out. Until then, I've been doing meteor shower time-lapse with the same equipment, and there have never been any problems. The next day, I took the dog for a walk. I went my usual way to the outskirts of the city, trying to get to where I had observed strange lights the night before. There was a black Defender Land Rover in the middle of the field, and people in military uniforms were looking around. Circling in the place where I was shooting, he called out to the dog and continued walking forward, trying not to look at them. In 2015, I just started my business. Together with my brother, we were engaged in the sale of houses. One day Bob, my brother, was on a trip with his daughter, was absent from his hometown for a little over a week, and had just returned home. I talked to him on the phone, and he said we should meet. He will be waiting for me on Friday, in a house that has just been renovated, to finish it completely, and put it on the sales list. When I hung up the phone and went to the kitchen, I suddenly thought to myself, he won't come to meet me because he will have a heart attack, and his brother will die tomorrow. Even he was afraid of such terrible thoughts, so he tried to discard bad forebodings. In the past, I have been scolded more than once for my negative reaction to some events. Therefore, I learned to keep it to myself and not share unusual information with other people. The next morning, I was sitting on the edge of my bed in the bedroom when the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, and it was my mother. I immediately realized that an early phone call is a harbinger of trouble. Mom informed me that my older brother had just had a heart attack. They called the ambulance crew, who tried to revive him. Mom was very worried about what happened. A little later, she said she would call me back later. But I already knew for sure that our loved one had already died. I went down the stairs and went to the kitchen, where I stood in a daze for a long time. I happened to look at the wall, on which the morning sun was shining, and caught myself looking attentively at a bright spot of light on it. It seemed to grow brighter and wider, and in an instant it completely surrounded me and held me, as if wrapping me in a gentle embrace. I wasn't scared at all. I wasn't even surprised by what was happening. I just stood in one pose, letting the bright, pleasant surroundings calm me down. As quickly as it happened, the solar lights disappeared, and I was brought back to reality by the sound of my phone ringing. I immediately understood what it meant. He held his breath for a second, then answered. My mother reported that my brother, he died. To this day, I can't explain it. My mother grew up in a rural part of Guatemala where witchcraft was commonplace, and she has many stories in her memory about the oddities that she and her brothers and sisters experienced there. Of all the stories that we listened to in the evenings with the family, the most terrible was associated with a young student of a healer who traveled a lot around the country healing people. The guy was killed by robbers in a remote area west of Guatemala City. Who knew his men wanted to return the dead body closer to the family home of the deceased to be buried there. They paid a small sum of dollars for someone to agree to pick up the poor guy's body and bring it in their pickup truck. The man arrives there, loads the coffin into his truck, and sets off on the way back, but the car breaks down on the way. The driver gets out and desperately tries to get the truck into working condition. The man was very hurried to get home. He is completely alone on a deserted road in the dark hours of the early morning, as the sun has not yet risen. Suddenly, a young guy in a beautiful suit approaches him. He appears out of nowhere and offers his help. Within a short time, the stranger fixes the breakdown. The driver checks the engine. The car is working properly. The guy quickly says goodbye, goes down the road, disappearing into the darkness. Not having had time to thank the savior, the man presses on the gas, arrives at his destination, where he is already expected. After some preparation, they begin funeral arrangements. Among those present, the driver passes by the open coffin to pay his respects, and sees that the dead man in the coffin is the same person who helped him with the truck. To this day, I shudder when I think about this story. A few years ago, my father died in an accident. He crashed on a motorcycle. From the moment Dad died, strange things started happening. When I returned to my dorm after the funeral, strange phenomena occurred in my room every day. The clock suddenly fell off the wall, it changed the time, and the hands moved in the opposite direction. The batteries themselves were separated from the remotes. Knocking was often heard. More unpleasant. There were pleasant moments when I unexpectedly received blows. Soon they became regular and quite painful. But the strangest thing that happened was ahead. I came home from college. Summer holidays have begun. After the trip, I took a shower, changed my clothes, and headed back to the bathroom to finish my preparations for meeting friends. It was one of the triple mirrors on the medicine cabinet. There was a smear of something on its surface. I looked closely, fleetingly thinking that it looked like letters. I tilt my head closer to the inscription and see that the word I is written in my father's handwriting with the elven symbol. That was in the Lord of the Rings. Everywhere he loved to put my dad. It happened 6 extra months after his death. And I have no idea how the word, written in my father's handwriting, appeared, since only my mother and I were in the house. I know for sure that she couldn't have done it. I have a photo left, which I will try to find to confirm the truthfulness of my story. I remember one case. When I was 15 years old, my mother in the kitchen making dinner and talked. There was a key rack on the wall near the door. Suddenly, one bundle fell off the hanger, flew across the room, and fell to the floor near our feet. There was no one else in the house but us. What force threw the keys at a distance of about 8 feet? The question remains unanswered to this day. One evening we hung out in his company. My friends got bored. I wanted to have fun with something extreme, and, after consulting, decided to go to an abandoned psychiatric hospital. We drove up to an empty building on the outskirts of the city, got out of the car. There were 4 of us, me, my best friend, and our girlfriends. After going around the hospital from all sides in search of an entrance, they found out that the only way inside was through the autopsy room. The rest of the building was blocked off, so we entered in total darkness, cautiously making our way forward one after the other. As soon as they were in the autopsy room, one of the girls starts to get hysterical. She gasps and cries. In a trembling voice, clinging to us in fright, the girl whispers that she can no longer be here. We tried every option we could to convince the coward of safety. They laughed loudly and made fun of themselves, showing absolute fearlessness by their behavior. Many times they repeated loudly out loud that everything would be fine, but to no avail. The girl did not give in to our persuasions. She wanted to leave immediately. 2 girlfriends were walking forward, one trying to comfort the other. My friend and I stayed a little behind the girls. I don't know what made me look back at that moment. Perhaps the morbid curiosity of my nature played a cruel joke on me. But I did it. I admit it was dark, but the moon was shining from the night sky, sending its dim rays to the earth, so the terrain didn't look pitch black. However, I am quite sure that really saw the outline of a small figure in the window on the 2nd floor. The blurry vision looked so much like a little girl. A white dress that stared at us intently. I stared stupidly there for a good 10 seconds. Then he suddenly started up and pulled his friend by the sleeve, stopped him, and forced him to look back, without taking his surprised eyes away from this window. A little later, I asked him specifically, "Do you see that?" "What the fuck?" I thought maybe I had a glitch, or it was a trick of the light. But no, we both clearly saw the girl when we looked there for almost 20 seconds with our heads up. At some point, a suspicion crept in that this was some kind of trick, the usual static picture on the window. But after 20 seconds, the silhouette shifted to the side. This movement scared the hell out of us. It served as a signal for the growing panic. We at full speed tapanuli out, driven by fear. Running past the girls, he shouted to them so that they get into the car faster. Everything that I have told you happened to us quite recently. I'm sure I've seen it with my own eyes. My friend fully confirms what happened. A little girl in a white dress was looking at us from a 2nd floor window. The psychiatric department at 2 a.m. I recently rented a house, having moved away from my parents. Something strange happens all the time in my new house. Every night at 2:30 from the toilet, located near the bedroom, loud screams are heard. When I go to bed and lie in bed, there is a loud whisper in my head that does not allow me to fall asleep peacefully. Sometimes someone walks in the living room, furniture moves noisily, and the TV turns on. But what scares me the most is the feeling of pressure on the edge of the bed. It was as if an invisible guest had just sat down next to him. To clarify, I wake up instantly when this happens. So it's not sleep paralysis. It happened about a year ago. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep as soon as possible. The bedroom was dark. I've always been afraid of the dark from an early age. I need to clarify one detail that has already bothered me. The door to the attic is in my bedroom. Oh, these attics, they're so creepy. That's why I tend to get a little scared when it gets dark and I have to get ready for bed. While lying down, closing my eyes, trying to somehow fall asleep, I began to hear a scratching sound from inside the toilet located next to my room. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, and adrenaline rushed through my blood. I sigh noisily, sit down in bed, and try to convince myself that there is no one there. Just a sound hallucination. It didn't work. As I froze, holding my breath, and peering intently at the toilet door, it seems to me that the scratching is getting louder and heavier. Every hair on my head stands on end, goosebumps run through my body, and I start sweating hard. Then from the bathroom you hear a thud. I almost wet myself with fear when I heard that. All I could think about then was why the hell the Grinch chose me to kill tonight. I huddled into a tight ball, silently begging all the gods to end this nightmare. But suddenly the scratching stops. There was complete silence. I was trembling. I drew in my imagination terrible pictures, which only a 15-year-old teenager, who I was at that time, can imagine. With horror waited that will be farther, and I saw this. The black crack separating the two halves of the toilet door suddenly began to expand. I hurriedly grabbed my hunting knife from the bedside table, put it under my pillow, watching the door slowly open. Just couldn't believe what was happening. The demonic entity is actually going to kill me right now. Looking at the ever-expanding space, picked up his useless weapon, preparing to repel the attack. In the next second, my eyes saw a clot of shadow. A sinister figure of small size appeared in the doorway. A strange black object about 4 feet from the ground cautiously moves out of the bathroom. My heart almost stops, my body freezes with horror. Then the black spot falls to the ground, crawls to the foot of the bed. With a quick jump, he jumps onto my bed and meows, clinging to my legs. I almost wept with relief when he realized that black monster turned out to be our cat, Susie. I almost had a heart attack because of her fucking pussy who decided to sleep on one of the shelves in the closet of the toilet. Since then, I've always made sure the cat left my room before falling asleep. I still have memories from early childhood, and most of them frightening, but one. When I was a kid, between about 2 and 3 years old, I saw several times an adult man who looked absolutely like my father, only when he was holding himself in a box to make a stupid face. The 40-year-old double of the Pope had the same appearance. He didn't even stretch it. I remember playing Lego with my brother in our room. At some point I looked out the window. This man came into our yard and went to the house. As he walked, he slowly turned his head to look inside the room where my brother and I were. Then, his eyes bulging, he started shouting something, waving his arms. I jumped aside in fright and sat down on the floor, frozen stiff with fear. My brother had never seen anything like this. And now he calmly continued to collect part of the designer. Now, when I think about this case, I remember forgotten little things. The stranger I saw was never right in front of me. I only noticed him through the windows. Now I am almost sure that I was one of those children who have visual hallucinations when they are still very young. It may seem that my story is a fabrication, but what I'm going to tell you is 100% true. My mother was a sickly child from an early age and constantly needed medication. Not all of the natives in the area where we lived liked the Americans that we are. Therefore, our family could only rely on the help of a local healer. He said that Mom was not sick, she was just being harassed terribly. Vision. The girl confirmed that she had seen a demonic figure more than once when she was alone. But at the time, she didn't know if it was real or just imagined. From the time when the baby could begin to remember events, and until the age of 5, the child constantly complained about the playground, feeling unwell after the arrival of the demon. It seemed to the family that the girl was ill with some kind of mental illness. After a visit to the healer and herbal treatment, the painful condition passed. Mom got better. Years later, we discovered that the medications she was constantly taking were no longer there. It didn't help her. As a result, the demonic figure of 30 years later began to appear again. But I guessed that my mother could not have composed such a thing. She really saw her. It was easy for me to imagine it, because I myself sometimes felt someone's presence in the house. I heard noises, and somehow I even saw a vague shadow, like some kind of ghost. Mom started having nightmares, and we all knew that something terrible was happening. We decided to return to those parts to check if the problem was related to the abandoned house. But it turned out not to be the case, no matter where we were. This shit followed her, all of us. I must admit, for a long time I thought that Mom was just pretending, until one evening, I was convinced of the reality of her fears. To cope with the anxiety, Mom drank soothing tea, and went into the living room. TV. I stayed in the kitchen, finishing a late dinner. The house was calm, and it seemed that nothing could break the silence. None of the family expected that everything would change instantly. Suddenly, we heard a heart-rending scream from the living room coming from Mom. To see what happened there. She was crying and screaming that someone had hurt her back. I didn't believe her until I lifted the shirt off the back, and, damn it, I saw it with my own eyes. She was really scratched. There was no one else in the room, but they were scratching. Long and red ones kept appearing. Again and again, as I watched, large stripes stretched across the body, writhing like a snake. I was really scared. I ran to get medicinal herbs for my mother and was already at the other end of the house when I heard the front door slam. I rushed to the exit and saw my unhappy mother heading for the lake. Keep in mind that it was a Canadian winter, so the frost was minus 35 degrees. She went out barefoot and in her pajamas. After I rushed after her, brought her into the house, and put her to bed, she passed out. In the morning, Mom didn't say a word about what happened at night, and to this day she doesn't remember the terrible incident, but I still keep everything in my memory. We are afraid that the attacks will begin to repeat. She has terrible nightmares again. Now our whole family began to see black shadows in the form of different shapes. Another terrifying sign of the presence of otherworldly forces in the house. We have a cat, and from time to time we notice that she looks at a fixed point, raising her fur on end, as if she saw someone or something. Then the frightened animal quickly takes off and runs away, as if faced with danger. My father passed away last year. He often talked about conversations with me that he would bequeath me a family heirloom, an old shotgun that originally belonged to me, his grandfather. For many years, this gun was kept in the attic of our house. It was safely hidden in the closet. After Dad died, I went up to the attic to check the condition of the shotgun, but I couldn't find it. I spent half an hour. I searched all around and made sure that there were no weapons there. A few months later, I had a strange dream in which I met my father. During the conversation, I asked my dad where he put the shotgun bequeathed to me. The father said that the gun is stored in the guest bedroom, in a drawer near the toilet. In the morning, I called my mom and told her that I would come home. He told her his dream and asked for the key to the gun safe. When we entered the room indicated by my father, I opened the metal cabinet, and of course, the shotgun was there. It is quite possible that Dad told me about the place of storage of weapons when he was still alive, and my dream is nothing more than nostalgia for a loved one. But I many times tried to remember our conversation about this happening, and I am sure 100% that this was not. As a child, they played in the future. I, according to legend, was the husband Drunks. He beat me, and I have 3 boys with him. A friend's husband is an engineer older than her. It's been 20 years. File for divorce from her husband because she's a drunk and beats periodically. I suffered for the sake of the children. 2 guys, another one in the stomach, the 5th month. A friend is married to an engineer. He works at the research institute, and I wouldn't have remembered about children's games, but I only found my diary in my parents' pantry. In general, I am a person who rarely catches galleons by type, showed up, and does not like to invent mysticism. I was sitting at home alone in the vacay, talking with a friend, just waiting for an answer from a friend. Literally for a second, I look up at the window and look at the edge of the 9-story building. In the window of the 7th floor, I see some beige stuff that is sitting on the windowsill, or rather lying. At first it seemed that it was such a dog, so I look back down, but suddenly I realize that it is too big to be a dog. Dumbfounded, I look there again. And no, if you thought it was gone, you were wrong. This creature sits quietly on. I can make out something like legs, arms folded like a dog, but very skinny. This thing doesn't have a face, just a solid color. While I was looking at this creature in shock, my friend bombarded me with messages, and the phone was literally bursting with notifications. I wrote to her about what I see. She asked me, maybe it's galleons. I said I could, so she wouldn't think I was crazy. I look up again and see how this thing throws itself at the window on which it was sitting, and even blurs a little like a blob. I screamed and, as if scalded, ran out of the room. Except for a friend, no one knows about it. And I don't think she believed me. But I know, I've seen it. I'm cleaning my apartment, and suddenly out of the corner of my eye I notice a shadow running from the hallway to the kitchen. Small, 40 centimeters in height. I thought it was a cat. Turning around, the cat sits and looks at me with his eyes bleached out. And as if asking, "Did you see that?" I'm freaking out myself. After that, the cat tried to climb into the mirror for several days. A big one is hanging in the hallway. Then he rushes there with his paws, then he pokes his muzzle, then he tries to get in from the side somehow. After some time again I saw a shadow, probably ran back. The cat also stopped trying to pass through the looking glass. In principle, I'm not afraid of it. But the portal is so portal. In the end, maybe in my world it's a shadow, but in that one, maybe it's me who is an uninvited guest in the forest, with my broom of the path. 2 houses down from ours was a house where a wealthy family lived. Mother, father, 12-year-old daughter, and a dog. As a child, I often visited them. Suddenly, they abruptly moved out somewhere, selling a house with a plot, 2 garages, a sauna, and an ATV for a penny. 5 times cheaper than the market price. After some time, I became friends with a girl. The girl whose family bought this house started spending the night there alone with her. What was not happening there? The trampling of feet in heavy boots on the 2nd floor. We were alone in the house. Black shadows emerging from doorways, voices whistling as if someone is beckoning. One day we arrived with this girl in the middle of autumn. We had the only keys, and in the middle of the kitchen on the floor, we found an old, shabby Christmas tree toy, in the form of Santa Claus, as they hung on the Christmas tree of the 80s. The girl has never had such a thing. During the evening, I took it off the floor several times and put it on the shelf. But when we came back, she was always standing in the same place on the floor. In the end, I locked it in a drawer. At night, I woke up from a wild scream of a girl. I came and found her shaking with shock. And on the floor in the same place, fragments of a toy that she crushed in the dark when she went to the toilet. One day my motorcycle broke down. I stayed to repair it. The girl left, closed all the doors, locked himself from the inside in the garage, which was attached to the house. Suddenly, I hear the front door slam shut with a bang. Heavy steel, the sound is unmistakable. And heavy footsteps in the house. I decided that someone broke in. He grabbed a wrench through the window that connected the house to the garage, climbed into the house. I examined it from top to bottom, reached the heavy front door. It was locked for 4 turns. I slept in the garage with an axe and the lights on. I live with my parents. I woke up in the toilet at night. I did my business. Returning to bed, I notice an incomprehensible silhouette, the size of a big man in it. The realization of the reality of what I saw comes at the moment when I'm already jumping under the blanket, and I don't have time to stop. I feel huge hot claws hugging me and gently pulling me to them. I make a rattle instead of a scream, break out, run out of the room in hysterics, weapons at the top of my lungs. Wake up parents, all confused. We go into the room, turn on the light, the bed is empty. After recovering a little, I lie back down and fall asleep. In the morning, I find a good handful of dirt, pine needles, and large brown wool on the sheet. In the house of my great-grandmother and great-grandfather there was an old large icon. Their house burned down, and the icon moved to my grandparents' house. When I came to rest with them, I slept in the room where she was. Every evening my gaze casually fell on her, and I caught myself thinking that I was a little uncomfortable when this holy thing was looking at me from a high cabinet. I slept like that for 2 weeks, but one night it wasn't on the closet. It seemed strange to me, and in the morning I asked my grandmother where the icon had gone. My grandmother replied that the icon had been broken a few months ago, even before my arrival, and had not been on that cabinet for a long time. That's when I got really creepy. I used to be fond of the occult. I searched and bought rare books. The house even has a separate room and office with all such good. I bought one of these books in another region, very old and valuable. Brought it home. On the same night, some kind of devilry began to happen. Books were falling off the shelves. The cat reared up, the door slammed. The apogee was a crow beating against the window. It should have been seen. I, an adult man, with a cat under my arm, screaming a good obscenity, ran away from home. I got rid of the book in the garage. It was summer, and after a night out with friends, I went home. Everything is as usual. I went home and called the elevator, climbed the floors. The elevator doors open. I see Grandma standing there. I got out, let her through, and she went inside the elevator, and I went to my door. And he began to open it. The elevator closed, but it didn't go anywhere. Well, I think maybe it got bad or something else. I went to check. I press the button, the elevator opens, and there's no one there. I still don't ride elevators and walk. My friend's husband is a car mechanic. There is a removable 2-story garage and employees. Somehow he was left alone in the garage for the night. I had to make a car before tomorrow. Standing over the hood, smoking. Suddenly a man comes up from behind, knocks on the shoulder, and says, "Let me smoke." Husband to a friend, but no problem. He reached into his pocket and froze. He's alone in the garage. The doors are closed, it's night. Turns around, there is no one. It could be attributed to fatigue and glitches. But this friend began to ask for a cigarette from everyone who stayed overnight in the garage. Then they moved out. From grandfather left the house in the village. We decided to go there for the summer. The village is remote, surrounded by forest, silence, convenience on the street. Night went to the toilet with a flashlight. I look, in the garden, a hunting dog is digging something under an apple tree. She saw me, barked and continues. In the morning I look, there are no traces that were dug. And there is no such dog in the village. I told my husband, they took a shovel. The whole earth was dug up in that place. They found a tea box with gold coins in it. A new house was rebuilt. My grandfather had such a dog about 30 years ago. I noticed a handsome young man in a military uniform on the train. It seems that the border guard is of a high kind, just black hair and white skin. In appearance, 23 years old, met my eyes, mysteriously smiled at me and ran up. I see out of the corner of my eye that he is standing in the vestibule, turning in his direction, and there the form is the same. The same tall stature, and it looks like he is, but that's just the hair is gray, and the face is wrinkled. The old man under 80 smiled also mysteriously, winked and left. My job was to protect the herd from predators. And it was the scariest night of my life. But about everything in order. Since the drought has dried up all sources of water for livestock in the area where the current paddock is located, there was an urgent need to transfer the herd as soon as possible to a more suitable pasture. Our group is the boss, 5 young guys, and a few older men, about a week. We were preparing everything we needed, waiting for the arrival of the animal wagons, so we managed to make friends. At first, our trip took place by rail, then there was a walking stage. So, in the first day we drove quite calmly, and by sunrise, we reached the unloading station. And also the first halt. They quickly built a camp, drove the cattle into a corral, and then began to settle down for the night. We decided on duty. I had the 3rd shift, so without delay I climbed into the tent and collapsed on the mattress, prudently putting my hand on the butt of the rifle. As usual, I fell asleep quickly and slept like a dead man, but I woke up instantly from a light touch on my shoulder. I realized that it was time to get ready for the 2 a.m. shift. The old man who woke me up said gloomily, "I'll have to go with you." The boss warned that no one goes on duty alone today. I was a little confused by his words, but silently got out of the tent and went with him. We used to guard the herd one by one at the old place, so the changed rule caused surprise. But I've been used to not ask too many questions. After walking a few minutes in the right direction, we got to the place. And that's what was in front of us. 2 guys finishing a shift, barely standing on their feet. Each of them has a weapon ready, a ton of empty boxes and used cartridges around them. I forgot to mention it. 2 whole fresh boxes of ammunition, about 1,000 rounds in total, we brought with us. 3 dozen dead foxes were lying in different places near the pen, smelling damn disgusting, as if the dead carcasses were rotting quickly. Moreover, the fetid smell is much stronger than usual. It all seemed pretty strange, because we usually work alone and hardly shoot. The guys hand us rifles, and indeed, the elderly guard stays with me, and those on duty go to the camp. But when they were leaving, one of them looked back, and in a tired voice wished us to hold on. I asked him what he meant, but the guys kept walking without saying anything else. They were too tired, I thought, so I ignored their advice. "So, old man, my partner and I are on duty according to the schedule. There's a full moon and clear sky right now, so we don't need to." You need to worry about flashlights, everything around is clearly visible. The air is quite fresh, but surprisingly warm for the local hinterland. Honestly, it's not exactly a bad night for a shift. We walk for only 5 minutes, when suddenly a scaffolding jumps out of the bushes near the fence line, and begins to crawl up to the slope. Nothing special. The old man and I raise our rifles, pull the trigger at about the same time, and miss. The animal completely ignores our shots. He keeps sneaking up, as if nothing had happened. I shoot again. What the hell is this? There has never been such a thing. I'm making a second mistake. Then an old man shoots next to me, but I realize that his target is behind me, looking around, and noticing a dying woman very close by. I looked in front of me again. I didn't see the fox anywhere, as if it had fallen through the ground. Chuckled in my head quickly. A thought flashed by. She must have run back into the bushes. After 5 minutes, this creepy creature crawls out of the thicket again. This time I'm killing an animal. It falls and convulses. I point the rifle and fire a second shot at the head to put the poor guy out of his misery. A minute later, we hear shuffling behind us. We both turn around at the same time and see a flock of 5 foxes about 20-30 meters away from us. We unload the cartridges on them. We manage to lay 2 of them while the others run away. We return to the starting position, and there are 3 more predators sneaking up. My bullet hit one, the animal turns off, and then the other 2 continue to crawl stubbornly to the target. The old man misses the second one, but then finishes him off. My next shot reaches the third in the legs. Then partner collects dead fox, throws them into the ditch nearby, just beyond the embankment, and we continue our rounds again. Turns out it wasn't the end, just a temporary respite. The invasion of wild creatures continued all night. Somewhere after 10 minutes, the same thing happened and lasted for our entire 3-hour. The frequency of wild fox sallies decreased as the morning light began to break through. This watch has become a complete madness. The old me, who are very good with firearms, simply could not hit the thieves. Animals continued to appear suddenly, appearing out of nowhere. Some foxes were approaching us from behind and from the side. We are not sure if they wanted to attack us or distract, but this always happened when dense thickets were near the paddock. By dawn, we must have killed dozens of foxes during our shift. It's quite possible that this was one of the scariest situations I've ever been in. The second night I was put in a shift fell to the output, but apparently the nightmarish situation has repeated. In short, the same thing happened. When I got up at 4:30 in the morning to start preparing for duty, the 2 guys who came back from the third shift looked like hell. Outside the camp, near our post, in whatever direction you look, piles of dead foxes were visible 1,000 yards ahead. On the third night, none of the workers who remained in the camp could fall asleep. People just lay there listening to the crackling of rifles. All night. It's time to hit the road. They started loading cattle, and I decided to take a walk. I went to the pit where the carcasses of the lizards were thrown off, and I was blown away. Not a single scaffold, just an empty pit. Where did they go? There is not a soul around for many kilometers. I called the boss. He got very nervous and asked him to speed up in order to get out of this creepy place as quickly as possible. I'm sleeping on duty. I'm lying with my face to the wall. It creeps into half sleep. Me back in the arms of someone. So straight in the whole back. Right under the knees. And so tight. I think, holy shit, someone insolent. I'm trying to turn around, hit this someone. And it's empty, and such a chilling cold down my spine to the point of horror. I want to write a prayer. And my lips, if not mine, barely turn over. Then, in one fell swoop, everything returned to normal. When my husband and I quarrel, I go to sleep in another room. He's having a fun night. Then someone strangles him at night, then just sits down next to him on the bed. Then footsteps similar to children's are heard, and every morning he tells it with such horror in his eyes. And I just know that my brownie loves me. I feel him sometimes next to me, and put milk and bread on him. And then the brownie started playing with me, tickle at night, meow in the ear. I had to light up the house. I was afraid that it would scare the children. And he left. It's a pity. Terrible things are happening in the apartment where my grandmother died. The entrance door on a complex lock constantly opens and closes by itself. Equipment turns on and off. objects fall and move. Voices and otherworldly crap are heard. But the apogee of this was that I woke up and saw a little girl sitting in a chair with glass eyes. I turned on the light. She's not there. It's scary. Warts began to appear on my palms. I went to remove nitrogen, donated blood. There is no infection. A few days after the removal, they began to appear again. A week later, we went to the sea with a guy and everything passed. I thought the seawater helped. We come home, everything is new again. It turned out that the guy gave me a pendant with 2 roses on the eve of these events. And it was taken a few years ago in a hospital with his ex-girlfriend who was dying. And when we went to the sea, I just didn't wear it. I took off the pendant and everything passed. In my entire adult life, I have had such dreams twice. Both times before natural disasters with damage and great destruction. Both times with a difference of 5 years, the most powerful tornadoes, unprecedented for our region, passed through my locality. No one believed, except my grandmother, who was constantly saying something about the gift of inheritance. 2 years ago, I moved with a couple of my friends to rural Indiana to live on my own away from my parents. We settled in a fairly large apartment in the semi-abandoned house of our mutual friend. By the way, earlier one wing served as a real chapel, and the other was occupied by residential premises. My mother once let slip that several exorcism sessions were held there and recalled an old case. One day, she watched the double doors to the living quarters open, something noisily stomping on the stairs. And all this happens during the next ceremony. Hell, even now it's creepy to be in a place like this. When I got there and got a little comfortable, my friend, with whom I lived at the time, showed me an unused concrete basement. Inside it is fenced off a room slightly larger than a toilet, but smaller than an ordinary bedroom, which at first glance was not intended for anything at all. The only thing that seemed significant in the tiny room was a strange symbol painted on the middle of the wall, which immediately caused both unpleasant sensations. We quickly left the basement and upstairs, Googled to deal with the mysterious figure. The information found explained that it was a symbol personifying a demon who preferred to take children's souls and the like. I don't remember exactly what his duties were. Now about the situation itself, which happened directly to me. At 1 o'clock in the morning, all my roommates have been around for a long time. But they sleep. Only I lie with my eyes open. I always find it difficult to fall asleep in a new place. Twisting side to side, in vain attempts to catch a dream, I decide to go outside. Usually descended to the gate of the garage, I take a walk our puppy pit bull. He has a funny nickname, Candy. I walk around the backyard and head towards the woods. The young dog is already so well trained that he will stay close to the walking one without a leash, and usually he scares off a flock of coyotes that are hiding around with a ringing bark. However, this time, when I moved along the path to the forest, Candy, he stops and starts whining plaintively. She doesn't follow me like she used to, so I turned to her and started begging. In a gentle voice, he suggests moving on. But, alas, the pet refuses to leave the place for a cut. She keeps whining and shaking all over. I decide to take her back. Going up to our apartment, I put the puppy on my bed, and he continues to tremble and look around in fright. By virtue of his own stupidity, he thought that Candy was safe now, she would be fine, and decided to take a walk alone on fresh air. The same way we got to the place where so sudden end of our time together with a dog walk. But this time, with peripheral vision, I noticed some movement near me. Someone was following my routes almost end to end. I just kept going forward until something clicked in my head, warning of danger. An inner voice said, "Look at this." I turned quickly, carefully peering into the darkness, hoping to see who was walking next to me. You won't believe it, I saw a white figure in the moonlight. A figure half as tall as me, dressed in a short dress. She instantly caught up with me. Then something whispered in my ear. Fear seized me, as if wings had grown behind my back, and forced me to rush forward, headlong. I don't remember how I ran into a huge cast, the yard, and sat down on the threshold. But wait, that's not the whole story. After catching my breath a little, I lit a cigarette and started listening to music. After some time, calmed down and decided that the candy is likely. Then he saw a coyote, which was larger than usual. Having calmed down, finally, I carefully made sure that I was ready for bed now. I almost forgot about the white figure that impressed me so much, so I decided to go back the same way back to the apartment. The route is the same because it is the shortest way home. After looking around, he slowly headed towards a huge open area, behind which there is a forest, and immediately saw something running in the dark. I became curious about what kind of animal scared me and the puppy so much, so I stopped and continued to observe the movement of the strange entity. The distance between us was rapidly closing, and soon I could make out 2 legs, and that the figure was quite large. When I determined that this bulky, unwieldy creature of unknown origin was still approaching me, beginning to manifest itself clearly in the moonlight, I rushed to our house. I heard something chasing me all the time, until I got to our door. A terrified dog was waiting for me at home, which was pressed into the blanket and whining. My brother always had terrible nightmares, frightening him and his family. But I didn't take these stories seriously until I encountered something inexplicable myself. The younger brother's bedroom, like mine, was on the floor with his parents. One night I was lying in bed. My room was the closest to my parents' bedroom, but I hadn't slept yet. Suddenly, our pet, Beena the cat, who was sleeping next to me under the blanket, jumped to his feet, got on my chest and hissed. He arched his back and snorted, looking ahead. I looked there and saw a small figure standing in front of my mirror in white underpants. At first I thought I saw my brother trying to scare me. Long accustomed to his stupid antics, I calmly asked the teenager to return to his bed. But he didn't budge. Then he turned to face me. Damn it, it wasn't my brother. To be honest, the thought that a stranger had entered the room, like lightning, pierced my consciousness, making my heart beat faster. The silhouette looked too pale, almost transparent, and after my words, it began to increase rapidly. It seemed that his height had already reached the ceiling of the room. The ghost was looking at me intently. His huge eyes were black and frightening. The cat jumped from the bed to the bookshelf and continued to hiss. I too cried out in terror, flipped the switch, but the light of the lamp, it's all gone. Nothing else reminded of the visit of the terrible entity. When my parents ran into the bedroom, hearing my scream, they did not understand anything. From the turbulent flow of my words, the brother, dressed in pajamas, also entered the room, rubbing his sleepy eyes. He said he didn't see anyone in his bedroom. Over time, I almost forgot about what happened in my childhood, but the other day I had to recall an unpleasant incident. 20 years later, I accidentally overheard my brother telling his new girlfriend that he could never sleep properly when he was a child. The reason for this, according to him, was a long skinny dude with a skin as white as a small skin, who was watching him all the time. A friend's cottage has a capital house on 2 levels, with an attic. 2 years ago, his 5-year-old son drowned in the pool there. Then no one lived there for a year. I didn't want to be there. This spring, they began to rebuild the cottage for permanent housing. All summer and autumn, 2 or 3 workers constantly lived in the dacha, and so did we on weekends. And so this week, I stayed there alone for a couple of days. I'm sitting on the 2nd floor, watching YouTube as usual, at 3 a.m. Silence, peace. There was a sound at first, as if someone jumped off the windowsill, and then ran up the stairs. And that's it, silence again. I went downstairs, all the windows and the door are closed. Well, I think it seemed. And tonight, over a cup of tea, I remembered it and told it. So, it turned out that the worker who constantly lives there now regularly hears both walking and running children. Sometimes it seems to him that he is being watched. He didn't tell us, he thought we would consider him a fool. Then a friend says that he has heard a couple of times. Everything happens when there is someone alone at the dacha, when the company is quiet. I was friends with a neighbor who lives on the floor above. She complained to me that a brownie lives in her apartment. I, as a person materialistic upbringing, didn't believe her, of course. Well, anyway, she left me the keys. I spent the night there, purely for the sake of experiment. I went to bed, everything is fine. At night I woke up from a wild roar. Gathering all the courage in her fist, she went to the sound. In a perfectly clean kitchen, everything was a mess. All the doors of the kitchen cabinets are open, all the dishes are on the floor. In general, I collected my monarchy and tied up with experiments. I went home, in short, and advised my neighbor to remove all the dirt from the corners. She corners was stuffed a bunch of things good, like the collection of cigarette packs, and put the glass with a piece of biscuit brownie. You won't believe it, but it's gone. See also missing at 334.